here with Rick Hansen. He's a 6-time Paralympic medalist, is also a Canadian icon, best known as the Man in Motion for undertaking an epic 26-month, 40,000 kilometer journey around the world in his chair. And what we're talking about today is the quest for building spaces that are accessible to people that are in wheelchairs, for example. And there's many different types of space inclusivity that needs to be thought of. So that's what we're talking about today. So I had to just to launch right into it, Rick. The first question is, can you tell me what motivated you to embark on your Man in Motion World Tour, and what did that tour achieve?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure to be able to chat to you, and again, thanks for including me in your ongoing conversation about functional and appropriate buildings, and ultimately accessibility is a big part of that. And what motivated me on my Man in Motion tour to a large degree is the School of Hard Knocks, and translating from being an all-star athlete at the age of 15, having an accident that left me paralyzed, and then having to reframe about what was possible. I had to learn about my own internal barriers and handicaps, learn about what was possible, change my attitude from loss to possibilities. And then when I started getting back in sport again and getting back to university and doing the things that I love to do, everywhere I went, I encountered physical barriers, and also barriers of others who also had handicaps in their mind about a person with a disability as being an equal and possibilities no matter what. And so I vowed through that School of Hard Knocks, as I traveled the world representing my country, that one day I'd pay it forward. And I'd been thinking of this old dream of a physical challenge of pushing my wheelchair around the world, and combining it with a purpose eventually became the reason why I ultimately committed to it. I really did want to change attitudes about the potential of people with disabilities, move people from the stigma of pity and limitation to inspiration and possibilities, and then maybe challenge people to think about what they could do to remove barriers in their communities, and leave a legacy for supporting spinal cord research that one day maybe someone wouldn't have to deal with the challenges and consequences of my injury. But in the meantime, for the next 10, 20, 100 or whatever years, there's still billions of people out there who live with a disability, and they can still live a whole life if barriers were removed. And so that became the motivation. Take my athletic talent as a marathoner, wheelchair marathoner, and put a period of time in motion as a volunteer to see if I could help create a movement. Naive and poorly prepared were we when we first left, but ultimately, by the time we came home, we had traveled 34 countries, 4 continents, 40,000 kilometers of wheeling, and generated $26 million for a fund that would help propel us into the future on those 2 big dreams, an accessible and inclusive world and a cure for paralysis.
That's fantastic. That's amazing. I remember you coming and speaking at my school when I was much younger.
Oh, wow.
And I think you did a PowerPoint and shared some images and some of your experiences. Can you give me an example of one of those major experiences you had while you're touring the world?
Yeah, well, obviously, right from day one when we left on the tour, we were leaving the Oak Ridge Mall, and so poorly prepared that the guys put a wooden crate filled with all my spare wheelchair equipment on top of the motorhome. And as they followed me, they went underneath a tunnel, but they hit an overhead warning bar indicator, and instead of turning around and finding a different location, they sent somebody up to the top of the motorhome to lift the bar up so the motorhome could keep going. And then they thought they had overcome that obstacle and floored it straight into the top of the tunnel that bar was warning them about, and they exploded the box right on national television in front of these 200 well-wishers that were going, yeah, these guys are going to wheel around the world in a wheelchair. They can't even get out of the parking lot. Good luck. So yeah, that was how it started, and of course it was a constant struggle. This is before GPS, iPhones, computers. I mean, at the end of the day, we were communicating by phone. Telex was a big innovation at the time, and trying to connect people from different cultures and parts of the planet to mobilize around a schedule and organize events, create awareness, raise funds, and so it was a struggle, and my team was unbelievable. I had an amazing group of really dedicated people who just gave it and helped put me in motion so that every day I could do the miles.
That's amazing. So moving forward, I understand your foundation has been focusing on a program that is helping building owners remove barriers in the built environment. Can you tell me what the Rick Hansen Foundation's the accessibility certification program is?
Yeah, Dan, we've been working ever since the tour was over to be able to continue on those two big dreams and look at barriers and solutions and have those solutions be globally relevant and portable. So we're like a social, entrepreneurial, innovation-oriented charity, and we try to think of these big solutions, and we really understand the barriers first and assemble experts that can really put their minds to it. And one of the big barriers that has still faced the 1.3 billion people who are living on the planet with a disability today, that's people with visual, hearing, and mobility challenges, is essentially the built environment. Still to this day, the places and spaces that people live, work, learn, and play are built with enormous handicaps inside that don't have to be there, and outside. And so we thought, well, we need to look at other sectors that have maybe addressed the built environment with new global standards and innovation that went beyond that met an outcome. And LEEDS was a tremendous example of lots of perspectives about environmental sustainability, energy use, and efficiency on buildings. And so that mobilized advocates into joining professionals in the continuum in the built environment to create a standard, and then to build up, and then to measure, recognize, and incent the progress in that. And now, of course, LEEDS is a global standard, and things have moved even beyond, and that's a powerful movement-based solution that was made here in BC. And we thought, well, gee, buildings are built for people. Energy is kind of like a byproduct consideration, and so wouldn't it be great if we had a standard that would be a globally relevant standard, and ultimately we could train and accredit people in the built environment, architects, engineers, city planners, advocates, and venue operators and owners and service providers who would really have the competency, the accreditation, and they would be based on the best use for the most amount of people in the principles of universal and inclusive design, as put together by experts and validated by people with disabilities, and then place that in motion and bring people to start thinking of policy, and eventually then rate and assess the buildings, and then certify them as they're either rated as not accessible, accessibility certified, or accessibility certified gold. And the gold is really important because today's standards eventually can be tomorrow's handicaps. So we want to keep that innovation and thinking going with a lot of smart people who are giving license to know that they understand what the objectives are, but each building and purpose is slightly different. But if the overall objectives are there, people can come up with great things that ultimately will be powering the renewal of a standard. So the vision is 100 countries and 250,000 accredited professionals with a power base of rating and assessments that will give us a great index on measuring where we are And by moving the competencies upstream in the building chain and moving to policy, then it'll become normal. It won't be this back-end bolt-on compliance-based approach, thinking of only a local regulatory issue as the minimum standard and working in isolation. When businesses and governments are multi-jurisdictional, they want to have efficiencies, effectiveness, and bring things to life as well. And they also want to be recognized for all the great things they're doing. And so we want to shift that whole momentum and have everybody working together towards the same goal. Get there faster together.
That's good. That's excellent. I think as what's really important now is that there's approximately over 4 million square feet under development in just office space in the downtown Vancouver area, and spread out over the next 4, 5, 6 years. And I think it's really important that developers and designers and municipalities are taking notice of this, and it goes beyond the traditional building code.
Yeah, exactly. If you looked at our rating scale, the BC building code would probably be in the 45%, out of a 60% minimum rating scale that we use. So it's an older scale, and it's not as broad or inclusive. And if you looked at that, you looked at the National Building Code or an Ontario Building Code, they're well intended, but they're very different, and they confuse people. And at the end of the day, they're not comprehensive, or they don't have enough scope to allow people to get things done. If you move to our rating scale, you could do move to the 60% level from the 35 to 45% level, and have much more inclusivity with zero cost, and ultimately recognize now you're opening this up. We have a symbol of accessibility, unfortunately, it was built on history, which is the symbol of the wheelchair, stick man in a wheelchair, but that's not the representation of the people who will benefit from universal and inclusive design. It's people who have varying forms of mobility, visible and not so visible, people of hearing or visual challenges, and then you extend it into the workers who want to move efficiently with obviously their own mobility or heavy physical plant equipment and or safety considerations, and the moms with babies and strollers, and on it goes, people with luggage, and it just becomes just so much easier. I went to a restaurant the other day that had built a ramp seamlessly in one corner, and a new employee was there, and I said, what do you think of this ramp that's been put in? And she says, oh my gosh, it's so much easier for our entire team because we can bring the dolly tray down without having to crate stuff down the stairs. And I go, well, isn't that a perfect example? Everyone benefits. I'm sure there's less compensation claims for the employer, and it's a powerful solution that also increases the aftermarket of the building itself. And when you look at the population, the demographics is 25% of our population has a disability, and 50% of the population, knows or is associated with someone with a disability. And ultimately, the market forces with aging boomers and their parents is going and growing exponentially. So people who think this is a charitable consideration only or a human rights compliance consideration only are completely missing the boat. This is an economic and cultural imperative, and if we don't start building to this new standard and reality, we're going to be handicapping ourselves, because every building comes at a discounted cost now. You have to actually go and right away it starts a chain of people who are combating each other to fix a brand new building, make it accessible when it should have been accessible at the beginning. And then you think of that lost energy, the negative feelings and emotions, and then the costs of the retrofit. And that's a major tax on Canadians that we can't sustain. And so, plus you're not liberating the potential of your workforce or your customers. And when you look at commercial buildings, if you were to move, to the next level, I mean, the costs associated with really doing that are so mitigated by the incredible benefits of productivity and effectiveness.
That's good. So why has the foundation focused on improving accessibility in the built environment? I know you've already probably answered a lot of this question, but what do you see are the biggest social and physical barriers to accessibility?
Yeah, we looked at a lot of different things. There's a lot of barriers out there for people with disabilities. Clearly, awareness that disability is a big deal is important. I think people need to realize, oh my God, I didn't realize there's so many people with disabilities and I should pay more attention. Maybe I'm only looking for the wheelchair. And that's an important consideration. Attitudes, moving from that sort of negative and limited attitude or stereotype to positive and normal, and then the built environment. And so it's a strategic decision for us. We think by focusing on the built environment, it allows us to be able to break through in an area that really desperately needs a harmonized standard and needs to move talent and knowledge upstream, and then held by the built community, people who are really making designs and building buildings, and not make it something you defer to some pseudo expert over out in the disabled community, because they can add value and fill gaps, but they shouldn't bear that burden of trying to fight upstream. So strategically, we just think that that's super important. And ultimately, by making buildings more accessible, then people will realize when they see, the certification and the recognition, then they realize, oh, I have to go and think about now my employment profile, and I can actually hire people with disabilities, or how am I doing on customer service, and what about product innovation that will meet that need, and also could be a new market waiting for me, and waiting for Canada to be a global force in this multi-billion-dollar industry that's just waiting for solutions. So it'll be a powerful accelerator for a lot of the other barriers as well. But it allows us to focus. I've come to believe that anything's possible, but I realize that not everything, and the difference is focus, and our foundation is still chasing those two big dreams, but we think that right now is the perfect chance to focus on a big global movement-based solution like accessibility certification, and see tremendous benefits for decades to come.
Now, you mentioned a goal you have for this. Yeah. How are you doing on that goal?
Well, we're just, as you can imagine, this is a new innovation. We've tested it, piloted it in BC. We've rolled it out now across the country. We have over 1,250 ratings of buildings, of all shapes and forms, everything from big airports and shopping malls to schools to small retail and commercial. And so housing, of course, is important as well. And so we've started that whole process. We have now a lot of organizations that are coming from the scale up in Canada that are starting to take their experience with this and move it to an international level. And so, for instance, our great partners at YVR at Vancouver International Airport, they were the first airport to be rated accessibility certified gold, and they are one of the most accessible airports in the world. And they're now working with their national and international airport authority colleagues, and you can imagine the impact that will have as people from all over the world converge. And of course, it's brand Canada, and love to see Canadians leading internationally with a new solution that can benefit their industry. We'll see that in other sectors as well, whether it be retail, construction. We also right now have one of the key leads on the new Seattle NHL franchise, looking at their certification and then challenging the rest of the NHL to look at their major facilities and stadiums, and that's really awesome and powerful to see. I think that's the first start, is using the global network of the champions inside who are adopting in the early stages of rollout. Then we'll start to work on big agencies, inside the UN or ISO and others that will hopefully continue to adopt this and power it out through their networks.
That's great. That's really good. So there was a study published in partnership with your foundation and HCMA that speaks to assumptions around the impact of cost on meaningful accessibility. Can you speak about the results of that study?
Yeah, we try to understand what resistance points are out there. Angus Reid did a great study asking people what their resistance might be to making things more accessible. Obviously part of it was not having the knowledge. The other part is there were some stereotypes and not understanding the size of the market and how compelling it was. And then the other was that people automatically thought, it was too costly. And as I mentioned earlier, they did this cost assessment, and it was really clear that if you move to our accessibility certified level at 60% in the rating scale, which would be higher than the BC Building Code and the National Building Code or the Ontario Building Code, so way more accessible. But if you did that from the beginning, there's zero cost, and you're now having a much better product and for everybody. And then if you wanted to move from accessibility certified to gold, which is completely the next level, it's a 1% cost, and it's you think about that for the associated benefit. And then if you inside that, if you look at the commercial building block, the costs are only 0.4%. So it's really much easier to make these adaptations in the workplace when you're focused on that than say in retail and old retail spaces or things like that are linking into housing. So really a powerful statement, and a lot of people are really encouraged by that, because then takes away that first statement. How can I do that in a cost prohibitive environment? And you look at that and you look at the market opportunities, and all of a sudden you go, well, that's a small amount to really drive more possibilities in a competitive world. I've got to tap into that accessibility market and their peers and family members who are coming with them in the workplace or obviously in retail or as customers, consumers, and that's a massive economic number. Conference Board of Canada did research on that, and they showed that there was on a whole issue of the power of the disabled market as consumers, that there's about a $314 billion a year consumer spending opportunity if you're accessible. They also looked at if you were tapping into the workforce, there's about 500,000 people who are ready, willing, and able to join that sort of work market. And then at the same time, they looked at the tax revenue. You have a significant tax revenue to provincial and federal governments in the range of about $4 billion a year. And so that's a powerful incentive when you think about that. So then it also allows perhaps some smaller businesses that maybe have some tight challenges. Hopefully there will be various levels of incentives. The one incentive, of course, is a pure recognition to your customers and employees and constituency that you're at or above where Canadians expect you to be. But then would be nice to start seeing, as we're offering in our early stage when we started up, accessibility grants. When someone gets certified, you can apply for up to a $30,000 grant to get improvements, no matter what level you are, not certified, or certified gold. And we're encouraging governments to, in their infrastructure spends, to be able to create more strategic incentives and even consider, as they have in certain jurisdictions in the green side, tax incentives and others where people can pull together the capital outlay and then write that off over time on the tax side. So there's definitely a lot of powerful stacking opportunities to help drive the change and get to the goal. And ultimately, you think about the cost of making things accessible, you have to actually mitigate that consideration against the current costs of relatively inaccessible world and the unsustainability of that, and then the economic payoffs of the economic and cultural benefits. And so when you put those all together, I think it's really pretty clear that we got to get going because the wave's coming.
Yes, that's very insightful. If I was about to build a building and I was to go for certification gold, my question to you would be, what is the business case? And if you could give me the top three main reasons for doing this, what would those be? Yeah,
first of all, get in front of the consumer market that you're building for, because the aging boomers are coming, and that's a massive number. You're going to see a huge market opportunity, and get in front of the compliance, because the last thing you want to be doing is dropping down to the lowest common denominator of your jurisdictional compliance issue. And then I would say the way to beat that on the third piece is get your staff from a trained point of view, get them accredited, get them to the point where you have the key team accredited, so you've got visibility all the way along, so you're trending right from the call for proposals for your architectural drawings and planning. You know that somebody has to be on that team that's accredited. You get a provisional rating from CSA and our foundation, so that when the proposal's picked, as long as it's built to that spec, it's going to be accessible. And then everybody who touches it, all the key players who touch it on the development side, are actually trained in that side of it, so that by the time you rely on your accessibility advisory committee, they're not putting their mouth to the fire hose on all the things that were missed. They're actually looking very strategically at gaps and local usability and issues. And so those are the key things. And then from an economic point of view, clearly you're going to see a building that appeals to more customers. You'll have, we found through testing that you'll end up with a product that's more desirable, so you'll be able to probably charge more, and at the end of the day, against your competitors, and at the end of the day, your building will be valuable for a longer period of time, and you'll truly be able to have a building that ultimately satisfies a much broader constituency of potential users.
Yes, I think larger employers should look for buildings that have this accreditation, so that they're seeing that as a benefit to hiring staff as well.
Exactly,
as you said earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
That's excellent.
And even if you're a small mom and pop shop, if you set the policy and you're contracting an architect or a firm or an agency to do your work for you, you should be asking the question, are you accredited? Are you going to bring me a product that meets the future, or are you a practitioner who's steeped in the past, and you're going to provide me a product where I'm going to have to fight upstream and be embarrassed on the back end when the community starts knocking and going, what the heck? And so so it's, at the end of the day, I think that's where LEEDS really had its tremendous benefit, is because they moved to policy with government, and they started moving to policy with almost every agency. And that's what we will see probably here over the next 5 or so years in Canada. We'll have our very fragmented kind of legislative jurisdictional architecture consolidated into a one harmonized standard, and then accreditation and certification will become the norm, and we'll be pushing out internationally and leading. And therefore, when all of our our quote business leaders are doing jurisdiction in multiple or business in multiple jurisdictions, they'll be truly feeling satisfied that they're actually on the right track, not having to do fragmented rearguard action everywhere.
That's great. Well, I'm certainly sold on it for our team, for sure.
Thanks, Dan. And obviously you can reach us at rickhansen.com, and our organization will be able to point you in the right direction. If you want to even have people just be assigned to audit the course, we have 7 universities and colleges across the country who are teaching the course, and Athabasca University is doing a global online course. And so very easy for people to get plugged in and take the course. Whether you take the test and get accredited or not is totally up to you.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Really grateful for your interest, and really honored to be still in the hunt for the dream. And we need more people to join us to get there faster.